Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second lecture on comparative stylistics of English and Ukrainian languages. This lecture will get you immersed into stylistic resources of the contrasted languages. However, first, I will help jog your memory with a quick recap of the first topic discussed. So far, we've explored the concept of style in language and the linguistic choices which define it. We've seen how style arises from motivated linguistic choices and how the author's choices create particular effects on the audience. Secondly, we've seen how foregrounded linguistic choices can be analyzed in relation to different language levels. And finally, we've looked at the types of foregrounding and the effects of foregrounded linguistic choices for interpretation in texts. In view of this, we've compared how two presidents react to the terrorist attacks in the USA and Ukraine. They both apply effectively the technique of foregrounding, where particular linguistic choices are made to stand out from their surroundings within the text of their speeches. In the examples on the slide, they both resort to linguistic parallelism. The sentences "we will remember, we will never forget" and "ми не забудемо, ми не пробачимо" stand out through the repetition of the same linguistic structure. Parallelism is a powerful tool in public speaking, and both presidents use it to make their arguments clear and easy to remember. Also, it shows that each repeated structure conveys an important message. Strikingly, people belonging to different cultures use various expressive means and stylistic devices to speak about similar events or experiences, and that makes every culture unique in its own way. And stylisticians are interested in describing those linguistic choices and identifying the effects associated with them. But when it comes to such basic needs as safety, the linguistic choices may appear predictably similar, as these on the slide. The sentence structures employed by President Obama and President Zelensky are absolutely identical. The only difference is lexical, the use of verbs. While Obama brings into focus the opposites, remember, forget, Zelensky resorts to the synonyms, забудемо, пробачимо. In both cases, the effect is the same, condemnation of terrorism. So, like other examples we considered on the previous lecture, this one illustrates the fact that foregrounding is a fundamental part of how texts of various kinds create meaning. As soon as you're done with this, we can move straight on to the new content of Lecture 2. The agenda we're going to discuss today cover metaphor and metonymy. So we start with the metaphor. Metaphor is a figure of speech that, for rhetorical effect, refers to one thing by mentioning another. For example, his heart is a volcano. They were cheeky little monkeys. To understand the functions of metaphors in texts and the effects created, we need to start with the structure of metaphor. The truth is that we do not just call one thing another, like the heart a volcano or the kids the monkeys. There are some mechanisms underlying this process. And understanding these mechanisms is important for language use and translation. The structure of metaphor was first described by the English rhetorician and literary critic Ivor Richards in his book The Philosophy of Rhetoric. Richards describes a metaphor as having two parts, the tenor and the vehicle. The tenor is the subject to which attributes are ascribed. In the example, his heart is a volcano, we are talking about his heart. So his heart is the tenor. The vehicle is the object whose attributes are borrowed. A volcano is the vehicle. What are the attributes of volcanoes that can be borrowed to talk about human heart? Well, volcanoes have magma trapped underneath. When the tectonic plates move, the earthquake begins, and the pressure on magma inside builds up. Then comes a moment it escapes violently outside. This understanding of volcanic eruption is projected onto the way human feelings and emotions are perceived. Only imagine that magma trapped underneath represents our emotions inside. The tectonic movements stand for social conflicts and misunderstandings. The pressure builds up. That is how we try to control ourselves. And finally, the volcanic eruption is a projection of how a person loses their temper. This perceived similarity manifests itself in the meanings of linguistic expressions. In English, for example, we would say we vent the rage. And that makes sense, as volcanic vents are the tubes where magma flows to erupt. In Ukrainian, the understanding is basically similar. We say виплеснути гнів. However, the idea of flow is foregrounded in Ukrainian, a violent flow that is being released. We also speak of popping the lid, bursting, or exploding as we conceptualize our emotions in terms of volcanic eruptions. While a direct and visible comparison is common to find and visit a spot, we also find comparisons made implicitly through substitution. The volcano in his chest erupted. That is the example. In such cases, the original subject or trait is left out, displaced by the metaphoric comparison. But in any case, in metaphor, there are two entities or referents, and a speaker brings them together, describing one in terms of another on the basis of their perceived similarity. In recent years, the structure of metaphor, its function and meaning were considerably revised and redefined. The American cognitive linguists and philosopher George Lakoff and Mark Johnson suggest that metaphor is not only a figure of speech, but rather a tool that enables people to use what they know about their direct physical experiences to understand more abstract things like time, work, feelings, and so on. So metaphor, they claim, is conceptual in its essence. That means metaphor is property of concepts in our minds. The speakers use them as tools for understanding. One life experience is understood as another experience. The field of experience are called domains. There are two domains. The source domain, which is concrete and based on perception, and the target domain, which is abstract and is understood on the analogy with the concrete experience. For example, in the sentence he attacked every weak point in the argument, the words attacked and weak point refer to the domain of war. So, war is the source domain. However, the sentence describes not a real war, but an argument between people. That means argument is a target domain. Linking the elements of source and target domains, such as the knowledge about war and argument, is called a mapping. Metaphoric mappings happen across domains. As metaphor argument is war demonstrates, the source domain is projected onto the target domain. Well, there are several types of conceptual metaphors: orientational, ontological, structural, and image. Translators may benefit greatly from understanding metaphoric mechanisms underlying various language expressions and make better translation choices. So let's see how it works. An orientational metaphor involves spatial relationships such as up and down, front and back, and so on. Let's consider the example: more is up, less is down. We usually say the temperature goes up. Keep your voice down, please. Orientational metaphors mostly coincide in English and Ukrainian because our orientation in space is similar. Let's compare. The prices keep rising. And in Ukrainian, we also say ціни продовжують зростати. Or another example, that was a low down thing to do. Це був низький вчинок. Think of other examples of orientational metaphors in English and Ukrainian. How do you talk about your mood, health, or income? Feel free to write it in comments below. Well, the second type is an ontological metaphor. It is a type in which something concrete is projected onto something abstract. We can perceive of personification as a form of ontological metaphor. In personification, human qualities are given to non-human entities. Personification is very common in literature, but it also abounds in everyday discourse, both in English and Ukrainian, as the examples on the slide demonstrate. His theory explained to me these processes. Його теорія пояснила мені ці процеси. Life has cheated me. Життя зіграло зі мною злий жарт. Inflation is eating up our profits. Інфляція з'їдає наші прибутки. Ontological metaphors are so natural and pervasive in our thoughts, say Lakoff and Johnson, that they are usually taken as self-evident, direct descriptions of mental phenomena. Indeed, they say, ontological metaphors are among the most basic devices we have for comprehending our experience. A structural metaphor is a metaphorical system in which one complex concept is presented in terms of some other concept. The key word here is system. It involves something systematic. The perfect examples here are heart is volcano or argument is war. They are examples of structural metaphors since they evoke the whole complex systems of different things and process at a time. Natural phenomena and physical conflicts are ubiquitous in human life, and therefore they are quite well structured and more readily understandable. The war metaphor, for instance, is realized in the following expressions. Attack and defense are seen as causes. Also, win and lose are understood as the results. For example, successful attack and defense result in victory. Unsuccessful attack and defense result in losses. Also, we have an image metaphor. It is created on the basis of images of different things. Let's look at these examples on the slide. Her waist is an hourglass. Or she's got head in the clouds. Translating expressions based on image metaphors is a challenging task, since images underlying this type of metaphors are culture-specific. They are acquired by the speakers unconsciously and automatically over the years in a particular cultural community. In the cited example, as George Lakoff explains, we have a conventional image of an hourglass in our minds, and we can call upon it without being shown a glass itself or a picture of it. We map the image of the hourglass onto the image of a woman because both images are similar in shape in some way. So metaphor in English and Ukrainian is not only an element of figurative language, a stylistic device, but also a human cognitive ability, a tool for understanding the world. In the same way, we treat metonymy. Like metaphor, it's an element of figurative language, a stylistic device, and also human cognitive ability, and a tool for understanding the world. But, unlike metaphor, where two objects are brought together, where two objects are compared, in metonymy, there is only one referent. This referent has a range of characteristics, and the speaker is focused on one feature he or she considers relevant in a particular communicative situation. For example, the crown made an announcement. So its mechanism is based on the contiguity. Metonymic mapping can be illustrated by the use of the word village in example 1. The whole village came to the meeting. The conceptual entity village and the villagers to whom it refers belong to the same domain of habitation. Lanneker's explanation helps understand the whole mechanism of metonymic mappings. He states that the metonymic process consists in mentally accessing one conceptual reality via another entity. In example 2, she's a pretty face. The phrase pretty face serves as the tool for us to access the person as a target. Pretty face kind of leads to the person having this pretty face. We also distinguish different types of metonymy. So the most common of them are represented on the slide. For example, we have the mapping where the pot stands for the whole. Like we need some new faces here. In this example, faces represent people having these faces. Or vice versa. when the whole represents the part, like come along in the evening. The other types of metonymy include container for the thing contained inside. When we say, for example, the kettle is boiling, it's not actually the kettle, but the water inside. Also, tool stands for the agent operating that tool. Like the pen is stronger than sword. Also, we say place for people. The hall was applauding. It's not basically the hall, but the people there. Or material for the object. This fox looks great in you, but we mean fur coat. This list is not exhaustive and can include other instances. In the comments below, write your examples of metonymic expressions in English and Ukrainian. Thank you for your attention. So far, we have defined metaphor and metonymy according to the traditional stylistic and cognitive approaches, explained metaphoric and metonymic structuring, and compared different types of metaphor and metonymy in English and Ukrainian. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. For further reading, feel free to take the books given on the slide.